All right, thank you guys so much. We have another Kill Rationalism video today. Now, today's video is going to be a little less taxing. It's going to be a little shorter. I just have to clarify a point I made in this series. So, of course, in Kill Rationalism, I believe it's part 2, the connections between perspectivity and rationality. I outlined the importance of the vanishing point. Just as a quick reminder, the vanishing point in art is the point on the horizon line where all the major lines of what is visually encompassed in the frame meet. It is an invisible inferred point that confers order, clarity, and depth on what is visually encompassed, on what follows it. It structures what is seen and what is perceived. Same thing, of course, with rationality. The invisible inferred point that structures, that structures our perception is obviously the laws of logic. Now, I'm going to read a quote, and we're going to talk about, we've already discussed the open aspects of the vanishing point, but we have not properly discussed the closed aspects of the vanishing point. So, we are going to get into that today. I don't think this video is going to be too long, but unfortunately I realized as I was reading Gebser, I realized you guys have been walking around with the yin. You don't have the yang. So I'm not going to read that. We're going to read one of my Substack articles. I'm not going to read the whole thing because a lot of it is already repeating what we've already covered in part 2. If this is your first video of mine, thank you. I would love for you to stick around. I would highly recommend starting with Kill Rationalism part 1, part 2, and then after that you can kind of go. But yeah, so we have the open aspect because, of course, the vanishing point in art allows us to see clearly, orderly, with depth, and of course, the laws of logic allow us to think logically. It opens the possibilities and the ability for us to think logically, to comprehend things rationally, which is a good thing. Now, of course, there is a closed aspect that for whatever reason I didn't quite understand. I didn't let it resonate. So I'm going to do a very quick quoting of Gebser just as a quick reminder, and then we're just going to get right into it. And so the purpose of this video is we're going to be talking about the point of limitation for different domains, whether it be science, history, mathematics, philosophy. Every single domain has a limiting point, a vanishing point, a closed aspect of the vanishing point rather than just an open aspect. Of course, the vanishing point manifests not just in rational, traditional, logical thought. That's just the philosophical version. Take economics, the laws of supply and demand, or the laws of economics. And history, this sort of basic laws of history and all this stuff. So it's not just philosophy and rationality. I don't want it to get confused. Anytime you get into a subject and they start talking about laws, these invisible inferred points that structure our perception, that's a vanishing point. That's an open vanishing point. Now, let's see. But now we're going to talk about the closed aspect. So here's the really key point I want to try to get across. What this is not going to be is a postmodern deconstruction that is cynically motivated, that burns everything down to rubble and then just walks away and says, historians don't have perfect knowledge of all things, therefore there is literally nothing to be gained from history. That is not what this is. That is not what this is. I have a disdain for the postmodernists who just deconstruct and destroy everything for no reason. I'm not trying to piss anyone off. I'm really not. I'm not trying to come in here and say the 8 years you spent studying philosophy or history or economics is a waste of time. It is not. There is a great validity. Each one of these domains, each academic domain has an amazing partial validity. It is important. English, philosophy, mathematics, sciences, all of them are important. All of them contribute to a meaningful, fulfilled life. So, don't think I'm coming in here and saying, historians are idiots and morons. It's nothing that I have great respect for historians. I have great respect for philosophers. I have great respect for authors and, writers of great literature. It's nothing to do with that. I want to make that very clear. What we're trying to do, here's what happens. And it's very Gebser. So, of course, in academia, you specialize. We can already see the rational division taking place, obviously. We are taking the whole, which is constituted of all these different academic domains, and we're dividing them and separating them from each other. There's obviously rational thought at work. Not necessarily a bad thing. I think you can see where this is going. When rationality and specialization goes too far, there's a real problem. Each one of these domains, they become so disconnected and so niche within niche to the point where it's not even history. You're doing this subsection of history, and you become so isolated and so detached from the broader academic and cultural zeitgeist. There is a compensation that begins to happen, a psychological compensation. So instead of just saying philosophy is amazing, it has all this great stuff, it is the only universally valid domain. Same thing with history, same thing with literature, same thing with economics, same thing with science. All of these compensate by claiming universal validity. It is not true. Does not mean you do not have any validity. We are going to talk about that, but you do not have a universal validity, including you, philosophers, and we will be perhaps deconstructing philosophy in a later video in this series, but that'll be at a time later. So, to quote Gebser, again, this is just a reminder. In the visual triangle, the eyes form the base and complete the synthesis of their simultaneous perception at the perspectival vanishing point. The synthesis is possible because of the trivalent or triadic relationship of the triangle, which not only opens up, but also closes space. That's what we're going to be talking about, the point of limitation, the threshold of limitation. This is where this domain stops giving you good stuff. But also closes at the vanishing point. Okay, so that's all you need. That's all you really need. Open up. Okay, so now we get the closed aspect. So the closed aspect is equally important as the open. Let's see. In philosophy, this is big. The vanishing point in the closed sense manifests in the form of the transcendent. Per the limitations of all things mental rational, philosophy, a product of the intellect, is tragically limited by it. Rational thought relies on the quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and the transcendent is quantifiably immeasurable and mostly consciously unknown. When philosophy attempts to attain knowledge of the transcendent, the philosopher inevitably reverts to their own psyches. So anytime you hear a philosopher try to tell you what the spiritual transcendent is, they will always go back into their own psyches, and you will always be, there's always a variance of interpretation. It's never going to give you this part is less than the whole, right? It's never going to give you that. It just can't. Why can philosophy never get it? Because, of course, philosophy is a product of the mental structure. So, of course, the mental is limited, as I said, to the quantifiably measurable, consciously known, as this series has made clear. So, yes, you are never going to be able to tell me what transcendence is through philosophy. I'm just going to read the rest of my article. Science, perhaps the mother of all perspectival thought, maybe philosophy's up there too, is also limited to measurement, its vanishing point. Science can measure only that which can be measured, and nothing else. Every science relies on a metaphysic, and every scientific discovery generates new questions that scientists either cannot or will not pose or answer. Once the observer becomes the observed, as is the case of quantum logic, say, scientific objectivity flies out the window. So measurement and objectivity, especially with the rise of quantum logic, which I'm trying to get out there a little more. Though I'm a little worried that people are going to manipulate it. In mathematics, the vanishing point manifests in infinity or incompleteness. You're more likely to hear an apology from your ex-girlfriend before a mathematician can tell you definitively what infinity is. Again, it's very similar to what happens with the philosophers. Anytime that someone tries to tell you what infinity is, we revert back to the mythical structure and the psyche and the soul. As for history, the limitations appear from the beginning, that is, at the origins. Any attempt to explain a pure origin or beginning of history quickly turns to myth or speculation. History can never provide you with any point of origin as it existed, only its reconstructed version created in the present. That is history's closed, limiting, vanishing point, the threshold of limitation. Does not mean that historians are wasting your time or they don't have anything valuable to offer. That is not what this is. I have a great respect for all of these domains that I've just sort of deconstructed here. Okay, all of them. I didn't really deconstruct, but you know what I mean. Assign that limiting threshold. Psychology is limited to the unconscious and perhaps the spiritual moment. The unconscious cannot be neatly charted or systematically measured. You'll find symbols, archetypes, and, well, who knows? Whatever's there, it's not logical. And of course, as Gebser reminds us, psychology is essentially a mental or rational understanding of the soul, but of course it's deficient in that sense. So I think you get the unconscious, it evades rational psychological capture. It doesn't. I don't know what to say. You have to be irrational. And the psyche also has a nasty habit of psychologizing away any spiritual moment, as evidenced by its treatment of the Jungian archetypes. The archetypes point to the spiritual whole that Gebser calls origin, which should not be conflated with temporal beginning, among other examples. So psychology has a bad habit. Jung has a really bad habit of this. Any spiritual thing. John put me onto this. And the problem with Jung, and I think Jung is a genius. I think he's a brilliant man. Just because I criticize Gebser every once in a while. Jung is a brilliant man. Don't get me wrong. But the problem with Jung and the Jungians is they get trapped up here, not in a rationalist sense. They psychologize. They get everything becomes a function of archetypes and the subconscious or the unconscious. Literally everything. I'm not joking. Everything gets interpreted in terms of psyche. It's like, no, there is a world, as John says, there is a world outside the cavern of the human skull. It's okay to put the psychologizing away for a second. It's okay. In linguistics, the vanishing point obviously manifests as silence, whereas in economics, it appears as value. Incidentally, the best economists are happy to concede the subjectivity of economic value. Even your free market libertarian economics, which I consider myself one, that is one thing, well, I'll gladly. To be clear, free market does not mean anarchism. We need to be a little more mature. Free market does not mean anarchism. It means not doing these ridiculous price controls, regulators. It's just ridiculous. Anyways, even those guys who you would think are rationalists, they will gladly concede that the value of an object is subjective. They'll just, yeah, of course. That's why capitalism is awesome, because if it's all subjective, give the power to the individual, not some economic planner who doesn't know your subjective opinions. Yeah, that's how it works. So I think economics has really been one of the domains that has adapted to irrationality better than most other fields. Maybe biology is in there too. The vanishing point manifests in art, and it should be clear that the vanishing point in question pertains to the closed aspect and not the point that artists use to create perspectively correct paintings. So when I say the vanishing point manifests in art, in a very almost literal sense, of course it does, right? Because that's how you draw perspectively correct paintings. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the limiting threshold. That's what I'm talking about. It manifests, in the form of representation. Great art represents the world, not itself. Once the artist breaches this limit, we get terrible postmodern art where some homeless guy jerks off a cow in the middle of a circle of elitist liberals so desperate to prove their superiority, they'll show up next week to watch him do it to a pig. The second art starts to get way too lost on the meta stuff, we're done. When Andy Warhol puts the Brillo box in the museum, we might as well pack it in, because we're not presupposing and engaging with art on its own terms. We're now art has been something to conceptualize and think about. This is the death of art. I would rather not experience, I'd rather kill myself than listen to this rationalist, well, what is art, man? I'm Andy Warhol and I almost ruined the Velvet Underground albums. What is art? And isn't it all like relative? And so, yeah, we got it, dude. Why don't you make something interesting, please? My God. Okay. That was a loud noise. In law, I would argue that the qualitative valuation derived from a quantifiably immeasurable source in the ideal of justice acts as the field's limiting point. Every judge, lawyer, and falsely convicted man and woman are searching for it, justice that is. Yet if you ask any one of them what it truly means, you'll hear more definitions than those who offered them. Some may be dispirited when pondering these implications, but that would be foolish. The worst thing to do is to engage in a rationalism that pins one discipline against another and privileges it over the other. No discipline can claim universal validity, but all can claim a limited one. That is true. Every single one of these domains has a partial validity, and none of them have a universal validity, so you might as well stop arguing with each other. As such, only ruin can come about if we continue to sector ourselves into our favored corners and pretend otherwise. Excuse me. What is needed is to render each transparent, affording us greater insight and freedom in the form of conscious awareness of each discipline's unique strengths and weaknesses, and to be integrated into a balanced whole. That's the spatial enrichment aspect of it anyway, but that's the easy part. The truly integral and transcendent aspect must be awakened, and only in those who are patient and compassionate to themselves. But this is a topic for another day. Besides, once we recognize the validity of all disciplines, we can finally stop hearing one overcompensate in the form of claiming that their field happens to be literally, and I don't use that word lightly, the only field that matters. Thank you guys for reading. Thank you guys for watching. Just something to think about. Again, I really want to stress this is not some cynical, I'm not trying to do that. I might fail. Maybe I will fail. But I'm trying to transcend and include. I'm trying to improve. I'm not trying to just regress. That's not what I want to do here. It's just ridiculous. I love you guys. I hope you guys learn something. Now you no longer just have the yin. I know you guys know the importance of the vanishing point to perspectival thought, whether it be philosophy, history, economics, whatever it is. I know you guys have that, but now you have the yang. Now you have the yang. I'm glad. I think this was necessary. I love you guys. Also, by the way, I just check out the channel Unthink Me with Adam Lowen, because we did an awesome conversation. We did one on my channel, and I did one on his channel. So I would, we talked about different things. If you were interested in hearing me talk more about integral consciousness with Adam, I had a blast. I am so thankful to Adam for taking time, especially with someone as such a small channel as mine. I'm just very thankful, very appreciative of him taking the time. And I hope you guys enjoy it. We got into a lot of really cool stuff. And I think we're going to do some more in the future, because we all had a blast. So please go check that. It's Unthink Me. It's UN, capital T, think, and then capital M, me. It's all Ken Wilber stuff. I'm obviously all Gebser stuff. So it was a blast. We had a great time. I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Thank you, guys.